This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts are not trained professionals, and their opinions come solely from personal experience. In this episode, we discuss fictional depictions of trauma and violence that may not be suitable for all audiences. Please take care of yourselves. Specific content warnings for each episode can be found in the show notes. Events in the media are discussed in approximate order of escalation. This episode contains spoilers. Hi, I'm Robin. And today I'm here with...
I'm Heather. I am the mysterious one of the other siblings. Mwahaha.
Spooky. Nicole is not with us today. They joined us for the first two books in this trilogy. And then today for discussing Wayward Witch by Zoraida Córdova, book 3 of the Brooklyn Brujas. It's me and Heather. Let's get into our factions. First, we have Rose/Eliza, Rose's father, Iris, Arco, Lynn, Nadira, Calliope, and then just like a bunch of fae. Just a bunch of other fae. There's a bunch of them. There's so many. I'm sorry, all you lovely characters. We didn't even try to list you all. There's so many of you. And getting into our first topic, we have Nadira, Deadly Journey. Okay, so part of why we don't list, all the faes, there's a bunch of them, and they just kind of, slowly die just as the journey, as the group progresses, members slowly.
It's very much it's very much a dangerous thing they're trying to accomplish, and the road there is very dangerous, and you just kind of blink and then someone else is gone.
Yeah, it's like you start out with kind of way too big of a cast.
So many people.
But by the end it's a perfectly manageable amount that completely makes sense and is great.
When we were doing the notes, I literally was flipping through the book trying to remember who was who, and then why aren't they on a later page? When I was reading through the book, I was surprised when I was like, I haven't read about this character in a while. What was their name? And then I flip back and I find their name at their death scene, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. There's a lot.
Yeah. I like this book. I definitely recommend it.
Don't over worry about trying to keep track of all of the characters.
Yeah.
But don't be surprised if you realize that someone just died.
Yep.
Though with this character, with Nadira, her death scene, at least for Robin and I, was very memorable.
Yes. Hers is the most memorable. It's kind of like the last... it is one of the later deaths, and it gets to pack a little bit more of a punch. They, talk about her in kind of a different way after she dies.
Yeah, her death kind of sticks with the main character a bit more poignantly than the rest of them.
Yeah, because she was along later in the journey, and so there's more time for Rose to have gotten to know her and to really be invested in her dying, because Rose didn't know any of these fae before the journey started, basically. And so it makes sense narratively that the earlier deaths don't nearly have as much impact for Rose, because she really doesn't know them very well. But by the time Nadira dies, it's very sad.
It's a very interesting context that they're put in, of the situation of they have to go and accomplish this thing. Rose has to go with them. None of them know her. Very few of them like her. And yet, as it goes, even as they die, they kind of end up both getting to know her better and caring about her more, but also for some of them it almost feels, and I'd have to go back and look and see if this is not just how it came across, but it almost feels like in their deaths they mean more to her, because a lot of them don't just die. There is a lot of sacrifice that takes place. Like there's a lot of, I will go so you guys survive, or I will stay and do this so that you guys survive, because the end goal is the ultimate thing, and my death will allow this end goal to take place. So that's the other thing. They're not going on this journey going, it's just going to be really hard. They're like, none of us are coming back. Got it.
Yeah, because for them, like, if they don't do this, then
it's the end of everything.
Yeah, it's the end of all their stuff anyway. Like, it's an existential, like, problem for everyone there. And with Nadira in particular, she isn't even from this place. Oh my goodness. The name of the place has dropped out of my... She's not even from Addis.
Thank you. So I'd also lost it.
Yep. She's not even from Addis, the land of the Fae. It's kind of an island. Yeah, it's like a real world island that slowly got so Fae that it became not on Earth, but also on Earth, but mainly Fae.
I do love how much the things in the mythos in this trilogy are ground into, no, this is actually on Earth. You're actually here. This is an actual place. But here's why it's now mythic. It's not just, boom, you're all over here and none of us know what that is and we have no context for it. There's very little context for it, but it's still, it makes it have more weight, I think.
And so one of the things with Nadira is that she came from elsewhere to Addis, and she's either full mermaid or part mermaid. I think she's a full mermaid.
I think she's full mermaid. They just can go on land.
Right. Oh, there's also part mermaids in the other trilogy, which is why I was pausing for a second. Yeah, so with this journey and with her being a mermaid, she's traveling over land, which is kind of a dangerous place for a mermaid to be. And one thing with these magical beings is that most of them turn into something when they die. And there's discussion of how, like, some might turn into, like, a tree if they're super old. She's a mermaid. She turns into sea foam.
Oh, man. The description
is like, really... a classic mermaid death. There it is.
It kind of gut punches you a little bit, though, because it's not just, and now she's foam. Like, the actual sentencing of that description, like, as you're getting there and you know you're getting there, is really poetic and really sad and really, like, very, very well described, in the sense that if you are somebody who can have a very active visual imagination with something, it's really gonna get you. And oh man, one of the characters we get to know more because she's in the story for longer. So we as the reader, not just Rose as the character, have more tied up with her. We know more of her history. We are closer with her, and then her death is also described more memorably. I don't want to say with more description necessarily, but the combination of those things means that it just kind of sticks out more and sticks with you then for the rest of the book, even amongst all of these other amazing characters who do get killed. And it is, oh man, it is a deadly, 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 deadly journey. And then they hit the end of it and it's like, oh, are we even going to be able to do this? Which is its own. Yeah. Whew.
Like when they lose people early on, it's like, are we going to have enough people to actually like do the thing? And so they're a lot more worried about it by the time it gets to the end. And one thing that I like narratively with how this is structured is, I don't know, like because we are meeting all these characters basically at the same time that Rose is meeting all these characters. And so Rose is the only one that we have known for longer than this book. Very much more on her side of how things are happening. And it makes sense that the later deaths don't have to escalate in gratuity or gruesomeness of description, because the escalation and the increasing emotional weight comes from how much more we know these characters as opposed to ones that died earlier on. And so it allows for this increased connection and escalation without it feeling like they have to one-up each other, or like narratively, not like the characters are trying to die in more interesting ways. Obviously, they're not.
I also want to say that the character deaths are also not throwaway deaths, because, as Robin said, they escalate the intensity of the story, but also the people who are still there, who are the other members of this journey, are going on this journey, care and talk about them and are affected by their death, even if Rose is off to the side going, okay, what happened?
Heather, I know you haven't played Pyre, I don't think, by Supergiant Games, but like for anyone who's played Pyre, you end up with kind of a similar effect. I mean, though, you know, it's a little bit less sad in Pyre because they're not dying, where, like, you know, these characters leave and whoever you get to stay with longer, you definitely know, like, way more about them by the time they exit. But you don't like them, you don't like the earlier characters less. You just literally don't know as much about them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very much, so often I found, and this might be my last thought on this, when you are playing games or watching media, there are often times when you've watched a lot of a certain genre that you can start being able to pick who's going to die next.
Oh, yeah.
I, at least, couldn't really do that, especially with the early on characters of this. They don't have this, you know, we just told you about our backstory in a way that you're now attuned to who we are. I just professed something. I just explained that I have a hope for this thing and now I'm dead. Like, they don't have any of those consistent clues, at least. At least, again, not in a way that immediately makes you go, huh? What's happening? They're just kind of one of the people and then they're gone. Which, again, is why it kind of feels surprising each time. And you have to, like, read back a sentence to make sure that you read it correctly, because it is so out of the blue. So heads up on that, like, as you read through this, yes, they did. Yes, they did just die.
I will say the one that I did predict was that Nadira was going to turn into Seafoam, but that's just like, that's a thing with mermaids. Yeah. It just is.
But you weren't like going, she's the next one.
No.
They're treated very equally in that, which I do appreciate, weirdly, I think, because I, you know, don't need it to be, look, we made you care about them, now they're gone. It was just, here are the people and you're getting to know them, and now this one is gone, and here's this one and now you're getting to know them and you're getting to know this whole group and now this one's gone. And it makes it weirdly more realistic. I don't know. But yeah, it's a deadly journey.
On to Rose and memory loss. So I really love this as a portrayal of memory loss. Memory loss, especially where part of what she can't remember is that she's forgetting things. Which is especially, like, a real problem when people have memory loss that begins and in a way that means that they're not able to remember that they're forgetting things. Like, that's like a real problem. And in this case, even that she knows that she might lose certain memories because she knows her father did when he was in Addis before. Like, it's generally a thing for humans in Addis that the consuming things from Addis erode their memory of things. I don't know, it feels like it erodes the memory of things that Addis doesn't care about. Because it's not like she forgets her companions along the journey or something.
No, she forgets anything tied to her home.
Yes.
That's what it is it's anything outside of this sphere she forgets about. So she doesn't forget about her dad. She forgets about the rest of her family, or is in that process, and is like, wait, we're doing this big thing. Cool. What am I doing afterwards?
Yeah, like, she doesn't really remember why she cares about doing the big thing. Also, like, it's so well written. It uses, like, context clues to let the reader know that she's forgetting things, because there's, like, a couple of key moments that make it very clear that she's forgetting, and make sure that we know why she has begun to forget. And it might be, I don't know if it's possible by, like, scouring the book to try and figure out exactly when the thing happened that means that she starts forgetting. I'm not sure how doable that would be, but we know, like, there's this hard point of, like, okay, starting here, she, like, definitely is. And, like, when reading it, like, I definitely noticed, like, a little bit earlier in the text, because this is my second time reading it, a little bit earlier before that moment, and I'm like, okay, it has definitely happened by now that she has begun to forget, but I don't know how precisely you could pin it down. But anyway, you get to spend a while, like, thinking that everything is fine, and then you find out that no, she has been forgetting things.
Yeah. It's, oh gosh, it's very subtle. Mm-hmm. But her fear of it, you spend, like, the first chunk of her time in this place high-key aware that this is a concern. And then she stops worrying about it.
Yep.
And then you start worrying about it.
Yes.
You're like, oh, we have other things that we're focusing on. Okay. Oh, no. Hold on. And it's a, I don't want to call it a subplot, but it is a consistent plot point throughout the entire story, and impacts different things. But if you don't track it, there's so much other story going on. It's easy to not track it. It's easy to have other things in your brain.
Especially think it's taken care of for now, at least.
Exactly.
One of the things that I really appreciate this is that she has some like very specific personal reasons to be very concerned about the idea that she might forget things, because she has a lot of kind of anger and resentment and just like a lot of really complicated feelings, a lot of which are negative and only some of which are positive, about her dad and how he had lost his memory. And actually part of the kind of inciting incident is that she finds out that maybe he hadn't lost quite as many memories as he said. Or at least at the time that he said that he still didn't have them, he maybe had some significant portion of them back. And so she already has reason to have like complicated, stressful feelings about the idea of losing memory. And when she's not quite ready to be done being mad at him, the idea that she might do the same thing, what she already knows he did at the beginning of the book, which is not much, that she might do some of that herself simply by ending up in Addis and losing her memory, that she might put her family through the same thing that he put them through. And it leaves her maybe slightly less room to be mad at him, or at least less room to be mad at him for the same reasons. Like, yeah,
she actually has to think about it and look at it rationally and decide whether or not it's enough of a reason for her to work towards forgiveness or work towards restoring that relationship or anything.
Yeah, because it's very, she's in kind of like at the beginning of the book, she's, in terms of like moral superiority, she's in a privileged position in comparison to her siblings or her parents, because she didn't like toss everyone into another world or make a zombie army or like abandon everyone for a bunch of years. And since she hasn't done that at the beginning of the book, her, like, she, feels like everybody has moved on too quickly from all of this. And then she accidentally finds that maybe she's doing some of it, and she doesn't want to become the same person that she's felt free to resent until now.
So the thing that I really think is interesting with how she as an individual process everything versus how pretty much everyone else in her family does, especially with the conversations around the first two books, the older siblings were very much either this is absolutely no fault of mine when it is, or this is my fault when it isn't. And that's both of the older siblings do both of those things. And Rose just sits there going, I haven't done anything, but this isn't over. Why are y'all moving on? Why are y'all healing from this? Hold on. I've been affected by everything that has happened by every other member of the family except for maybe her mom's choices. I am hurt. I am in pain. I am angry. I am older now. She starts a lot younger at the beginning of the series. It's been a couple of years. She's becoming the age that her sisters were at the beginning of the series, I think. Yeah, because she has her own day, her own coming of magic ritual, or coming of age magic ritual. There we go. And so it's like she's very external. It's everyone else has done this, and then gets faced with but now you might do the exact same thing, and you have no way to stop it. You have no agency in this. So it's not just you might be the same person that your siblings were. You might make the same decisions. It's you're gonna, and you can't hold any superiority over it, in not even the sense of you're making the same choices that they did, but in the sense of if you don't have agency, what makes you think they did? Have you thought about that? Maybe they don't have agency. And that's not necessarily that they don't have agency in the other books, but she's confronted with that as a possibility for why the things have happened the way they happened, which she doesn't consider at the beginning.
Yeah, because she definitely thinks of everyone else having had a lot more control. And not that they didn't have control as characters, but she
thinks that all of the situations could have been avoided by the choices of the other people.
Well, and also she has been the one in the helpless position with relationship to both of their things, because she's just, stuck in the tree in the other world where Alex goes on a jaunt with her girlfriend.
Well, and with her dad as well. So
right.
It's with 3 out of the 4 major other family members. She has been in a helpless, affected, victimized situation, and now she is finding herself in a position of she might become the person making the choices that are negative, but becoming that person won't be within her own agency because she's losing the memories of impacting other people. She's losing the memories of her home, of her family, of the people she cares about. And it scares her. And yet she's also confronted with, my dad went through the same thing and I've been so angry at him for all of this stuff. Maybe that wasn't fair, but I'm still angry. And it's this dual inner conflict that she has for so much of the story.
Because there's room for both that maybe it's not all the way fair for her to be that angry at him, but also she is angry.
And it's learning, I think it's an important difference of the anger of someone's choices, like that they made a choice, and angry at the impact it had on you. And she's learning how to discern between those two, because just because somebody actually didn't have a choice or agency was taken from their hands, okay, so now you don't have the anger towards them, or maybe it's unfair, but you can, and 100% it is valid to be angry that the impact had an effect on you.
Or not even necessarily always, I think this would be like the last thought for this section, but not even necessarily always that someone doing something that hurt her means that they didn't, not necessarily her learning that means that they didn't have agency, but that there being room for someone else to have made a different decision. And so it's like, okay, well, you're now in the same position that your dad was in a lot of ways.
But it's
what are you going to do now? You don't like what he did.
So what are you choosing? And it's without it being a invalidation of all of the pain and hurt and anger that she has had because of the effect it's had on her life. The author doesn't invalidate that. It says, no, that's very real. So how are you going to not do that? And it's,
very well done.
Yeah. Hard topics.
On to Rose and abandonment. No one's favorite time. Okay. I was going to say everyone's favorite. No. Probably not. No. Okay. This discussion will spoil a major plot point. If you do not want a major plot point to be spoiled, Rose has a bunch of abandonment and a bunch of stuff related to abandonment, and we're going to talk about who left and maybe a bit of what they did. So, this will spoil things. Yep, this will spoil things. So, if you don't want that, please jump straight to the wrap-up. The timestamp is in the show notes. Okay. For abandonment.
Ooh. Oh my goodness.
So much. Okay. So this is as much about who left, why, how it made Rose feel, and what he did while he was gone. Yeah, it's about all of that.
I do want to start off with saying that she doesn't just feel abandoned by one person. There is a general air of neglect and abandonment, and the idea that, at least by the rest of her family, that she's always confident and capable and can take care of herself and is having to do that on her own. And then it gets focused in on the fact that her dad did leave the family for a long time. And then...
So keeping in mind that even though we start the book not as much talking about how she feels how she feels because of the abandonment from her dad, the way in which she feels currently abandoned by her family definitely has its roots in the stuff with her dad. So first I want to briefly talk about how she feels at the start of the book with respect to all of her family, because she feels kind of like emotionally abandoned. Like she's emotionally adrift from them. She feels out of step with the way that they are proceeding through the world, because she feels as though they have somehow been able to move on from what happened to them in the previous books and even before the events that are recorded in Labyrinth Lost and Brooklyn, and Bruja Born. Yeah.
She definitely has a bit of resentment growing, not just for her dad who left, but also for the fact that her siblings, as they are processing and healing the after effects of their own choices, are not seeming to care about how she is doing after all of the events that have taken place. And then I think there's like I think it's an argument, right? I don't remember. It's been a little bit since I read it. There's something that happens that then, the people show up. Anyway, so she and her dad end up in this other place, and now she is shown how he lost his memory, and starts having to process and deal with, as we said in the last topic, the own potentiality of her losing her memory, and oh no, now she's going to be put in the same position he was. And then, so she's having all these big emotions and has resentment and is trying to deal with the big journey that they're on, literally physically on, to go stop this thing and fix the place that they're living at, in order for her to then be released and go home. And it's a doozy. So she's going through a lot, and then finds out what her dad was up to while he was there.
Yeah, and part of what he was up to was having a whole other family.
Yeah.
And that has its own, like, special kind of sting because, she is told, first she's told that he can't remember at all what happened. Then she hears stuff about, like, salt mines and having to eat flowers. And she gets this, like, kind of much more awful picture of what happened to him. And that's not wrong. But has a new wife and a new kid really wasn't part of that image.
Grown up without a dad and finds out that this other person had her dad while she didn't. And then also wrestles with, like, they have two opposing viewpoints of him. But they are both hurt because they've both been abandoned by him, and both times kind of not of his own choice. But kind of yes. Right. I think the sibling, he left to go back to the original family, right? Or was it he realized he had his family and had to go? But
no, because he didn't remember about his other family until about his original family until he had been in Florida for like 6 months.
That's right. So yeah, they both lose him without him choosing to abandon them. But for both of them, he doesn't immediately go home, and instead goes to another family, and.
Both times.
And then they kind of reconcile that to an extent, thankfully.
Well, I think Lynn was maybe a little bit more able to reconcile it because Lynn didn't think that their father left. Lynn thought that he had been killed. And so finding out
that he's alive.
That he... Right. It's a very different feeling to feel like, oh, I thought you were dead. Well, actually, I was alive and just, like, couldn't really get back. Where
they kind of...
The family in Brooklyn, they kind of, sort of, they had something that looked a little bit like that, but there's a difference between you've been gone long enough that you're probably dead, and the king hates you and actively kills people, and so you're probably dead. Like, those are two different kinds of probably dead.
And her dad has been back long enough that Rose has had time to adjust and know he's no longer dead. He's back with us. So she's moved past that piece of it and has moved on to the, why did it take you so long? Where were you? What were you doing? Versus the other family where it's like the sibling, what's the sibling's name? I'm going blank. Lynn, thank you. Versus Lynn, who is still at the, I got my dad back.
Right. And Lynn is also like a bit younger.
Yeah. So I would actually be very interested to see how Lynn processes things in a couple of years when they've hit the same amount of processing time that Rose has, but this time they have more of the answers. The family has more support. Things are developing better. Like, it's, oh man, talk about having similar situations and very different reactions and effects on you by it. But I also really appreciate that in the story, it's not a one and done in terms of Rose's relationship with her dad. It's not like, I hate you. No, now we're great. It's slow. It's questions. It's coming back at the end of the book, and things aren't perfect, but they're at, finally, by the end of the book, they're at a new point where they can start to heal.
And like as a trilogy, these 3 books, they're very much like different kinds of coming of age, and Rose's kind of coming of age. So like, I don't know, Alex is a little bit like, you can't, I'm not sure what Alex's is. The second one in Bruja Born, the message is like, you can't control everything. That's absolutely the message of Bruja Born, is that you can't control everything. And the message of Wayward Witch is that, I think
it's kind of the message for all 3 of them, but in their own way. You can't control it. Well, but then how it manifests and how it affects each of them is extremely different. Because like in this one,
well, what I was gonna say is that for Rose, the message is that things are complicated, and you can have complicated feelings about them. And you need to give other people space to have complicated things about them and to be like, you know, happy about things that maybe you don't like, or upset about things that you do like. And like the mere existence of Lynn at this point in time means that they can't all ever be happy about the exact same thing, because there is a way in which, and Rose doesn't express this thought in the book, and for that I'm grateful, because like it would be like a bit harsh and make it like a little bit harder to like Rose if this was a thought that she had immediately jumped to. But there's a way in which, as a character, the ending for her is much neater when Lynn's mother is already dead. And I think that if she were to say that to Lynn, that would be like extremely harmful and very bad. But her happy ending is incompatible with Lynn's hypothetical best version of a happy ending, which is that their dad comes back and their mom didn't die. So like their best version is something closer to the one that Rose actually get.
I would say for Rose, okay, it's things are complicated. Let complications and complicated feelings exist together. For Alex, I would say you cannot deny yourself. You cannot deny who you actually are. Like you can work with who you are to become who you want to be, but you can't. It is completely unhealthy to try and cut literal pieces of yourself off. And she like tries to cut her magic out, and that is an intrinsic part of her, and she cannot do that. Gosh, I'm doing horrible with names today. The oldest sister. Wow. Anyway, hers is you cannot be in control.
Lula.
Thank you. It's Lula. She cannot be in control of destiny. She could be in control of herself and her own choices. So I would say if that's what you're going for, those are each of their own coming of age realizations and things they have to work through. Yeah. No, Abandonment is a very solid struggle in this entire book, that Rose is constantly thinking about and processing, and while trying to go and save this island. Yeah. Oh man, these books really dig in.
We've made difficult decisions.
And there are still more ahead of us.
2 people aren't enough to save the galaxy.
We need the toughest,
smartest,
deadliest allies.
We need you.
We need you to join us.
And listen to Reignite,
a certain point of view podcast about storytelling,
love,
and Mass Effect.
Join us every other Thursday as we fight for the fate of an entire galaxy.
You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts.
Or at certainpov.com/reignite.
We're counting on you.
We should go.
We have a new patron at the library curator level. Please welcome Case Aiken to the ranks of patrons receiving a monthly shout-out. Thank you so much for supporting the show, and if you would like to join Case in keeping the show going, you can check us out on patreon.com/booksthatburn. Hello, it's the wrap-up and ratings for Wayward Witch, and I am Robin, and I'm not here with Nicole. I am here with...
Heather. Hello, I'm back. Round
Hello.
3, here we go.
Yes. I mean, if you listened to all the other parts of the episode, you already know that I'm talking to Heather. But if you jump straight to the wrap-up, as is your right, and occasionally recommended if you're trying to avoid spoilers, then, yeah, I'm talking with Heather. Nicole's not here today. They were doing a different thing called being busy on a Tuesday night, which is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so... all right. So
they're not here. They're doing their own thing. Wrap up. Here we go.
Yes, wrap up. Anyway, for the gratuity rating for the journey. All right, what do we think for this journey? I think it's at least moderate.
I don't think it's severe.
Okay, that fits with my at least moderate stance.
Because I would say it's moderate. It's very consistent. It is you're constantly aware of it, but you as the reader do not feel as if you are being dragged through the journey itself. You are not in danger. You are not, your anxiety is not spiking, hopefully.
So that part of it more goes into care.
Yes. But it's also, you're constantly aware of it, but you're not, none of it is.
I really think that this is moderate.
Yes,
because
it's not mild.
It's
not mild.
Right. I do think it's moderate. Because as many characters as die in this deadly journey, you don't spend. It's weird. You don't spend the whole time waiting to see who's going to go next.
And
it's like, oh, and there's another one.
And there are certain deaths that are more, gut punchy and hit you more than others. So it's also not just, oh, look, and people die and we move on. Like it is, right. It takes a toll.
It's not callous, but it's like, yeah, there's a lot of death related tropes that it could have leaned into more, and generally speaking, it doesn't. If you check the content warnings, most of those tropes associated with death, like they're just in the, like I didn't really mark any of them as graphic. So
yeah,
I do think that this is a moderate gratuity. Now, is the memory loss? It's somewhere between moderate and severe, because that's at least what I think. I would actually lean towards moderate.
I was going to say between mild and moderate, so I think moderate's good.
Okay, yeah, because don't want to belabor that too much. It's moderate.
Yeah.
Abandonment,
I'd say moderate to severe.
Okay. Yeah. I would actually...
She processes it so much. It's very pervasive. It's very...
I think her abandonment was more severe in the other books. Because this is, by definition...
Because the aftermath of the abandonment.
Right. Yeah. Like, they're together. And that's kind of the point of this book, is like reconciling that prior hurt and figuring out how to deal with it.
The healing process of abandonment, severe. The actual abandonment itself, mild or moderate.
Yeah, I think moderate.
Yeah.
The spoilery surprise. Do you think that the spoilery surprise associated with abandonment kicks it up to severe? Because if anything does, it would be that does.
I don't think it would make it severe, but I definitely would say it's a reason why it's not mild.
Sounds good. All right, so that one's moderate. Moderate all around.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the trauma integral, interchangeable, or irrelevant? All right, with the deadly journey, I would like to argue that it's by definition interchangeable. It just is. Like, there's enough deadliness in the deadly journey that, like, it's kind of spread around.
You could have changed you could have changed how. You could have changed how many. When. You could have changed when. You could have had literally fewer people die, but just get injured. The deadliness of the journey doesn't even
it's pretty important.
Like, the final piece of it is what's important. The fact that it's not an easy journey is important.
Is your counter that it didn't even need to be a deadly journey? Because that would make it irrelevant, and I find that interesting.
No,
I don't think you're wrong
you
necessarily.
Needed the ramp up. I would argue you needed the ramp up. But you didn't need it as much as it's in there.
And you could definitely have changed
you could have changed who, you could have changed how, you could have changed when.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yep. Memory loss is integral to the plot.
Yeah. Yes.
Like,
yes.
Yeah. Books 1 and 2 would have had to be very different in order for memory loss to not be relevant here. So this is
memory
integral.
Loss is the sparking point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Abandonment. Okay.
Oh God. I kind of think abandonment is irrelevant.
It's interchangeable. Ooh, irrelevant. Okay. Explain irrelevant, because I was going to go, it's not integral. It might be interchangeable.
She didn't need to have the abandonment to show up there. She didn't need to have the abandonment to go on the journey. She didn't need the abandonment to fix the thing at the end, and she didn't need the abandonment to reconcile with her dad.
There's...
Yep.
It would have made the first 2 books pretty different.
Yes.
But
overarching for the series, I think it's a natural thing for her to be having to handle and deal with, but for this individual book, she didn't need it.
Abandonment didn't have to be the thing that she was still processing.
It was a very good flavor for the book. It made it very tasty, so that it's not just we're going on a journey and a bunch of people are dying and now we fixed it. Like, it gives an undercurrent, but
for this plot it is irrelevant. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's always fun when our, like, biggest trauma in the book
even the twist at the end
irrelevant.
Even the twist with this last topic.
Yeah,
flavor
irrelevant.
text. Great.
Lovely. Appreciate the flavor, but yep, it's irrelevant. Okay. Was the trauma treated with care? I don't think the deaths were... I think they were either treated with not enough or, yes, just enough care. Okay, yeah. Because, like...
You were not... None of them were belabored. Even the longest quote-unquote death scene scenario was, like, 2 pages of the whole thing happening. The actual death itself was like less than a paragraph of details and information. So yeah, I would say it's just enough. You're also...
The deaths aren't very graphic, but there isn't much cushion around them.
Exactly. And in the first topic we talked about the level of graphicness of the most graphic, or at least the one that stuck out the most. And I think we discussed it in about as much detail as it is in the actual book. So there's a little bit more, maybe.
There's a death later.
Oh, that's true.
I do not want to spoil.
That's true. Yeah.
So that death was a little bit more, but yeah, this is enough care.
Yeah. There's a lot.
The deadly journey.
But it's not completely callous or graphic.
Yep. For the memory loss, that
was care. There was lots of care.
This was treated with a lot of care.
Again, like the actual, you kind of miss almost when she starts losing her memory, and you're aware that it's a concern.
And with a topic like memory loss, I think part of the care was making sure that at a certain point through the book, the reader specifically knows that it's happening. I think that is part of the care.
And
both that it doesn't belabor it and that it makes sure that we know.
I'm not going to say that. That might be a spoiler. Yeah.
No spoilers. Okay, for the abandonment, I don't really think this was treated with care. I don't, like...
She's thinking about it a lot. She's processing it a lot. She's very vocal, whether it's in her inner monologue that we're reading or out loud. You're really aware of it. You're aware of how it's affecting her, the exact treatment she's gone through.
And I would like to say that, especially for one where you said that it was moderate irrelevant and then not treated with care, this part of what's happening in her emotional landscape is processing the very, very messy, raw emotions related to that abandonment. And so part of what makes it the book that it is giving her the space to deal with it. But
which I will
part
say,
of what makes and the book that it is that
I will say I appreciate that the author specifically addresses it based off of how the other books went. But they addressed it by having the character process it in almost real time with you.
Yes. Which is great in the book, but also doesn't feel like that topic has a bunch of care with respect to
if you're
how
going
hard
through
it
anything.
Might be for someone to read.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. For the point of view, for the trauma and aftermath, I would like to say it is Rose the whole time, but memory loss Rose feels different than trying not to forget Rose. And so we kind of have two different flavors of Rose throughout the book.
Two different perspectives, even though it is the same person, because the approach that they're coming at different things is different.
Yep.
Yeah. But everyone else, everything else is Rose.
Yep, it's all Rose. All right, time for Trope Spotter, where we talk about a trope that is in the book, and the trope for this book is trapped in another world. All right, you can quibble about how this island of Addis being actually somewhere that you could point to on a map, but only boat to if you're you only actually physically swim to if you're magical or whatever. If you want to quibble about whether that's really another world, okay, fine, I see you. But this, they went through a portal to get here, and they go through a portal to get home. Yeah. This is a portal fantasy story.
The effects on it are pretty isolated to that place. It's not pollution into the ocean that's going to affect the whole world, unlike the other things that happened where it very much was. This is impacting more than just this sphere of existence.
Yep, so there's the trope spotter is trapped in another world when the characters are trapped in another world.
Shocker.
It's exactly what it says on the tin.
And there are some other tropes we thought about, but they would have been major spoilers.
Yeah.
There are lots of tropes in here, but...
Yes. Spoilery ones. All right. What was your favorite non-traumatic thing about the book?
Oh, gosh. Gosh, my favorite non-traumatic thing. Do you have one? I have to think of one. I know that I have them. I just can't think of what they are right now.
So much of this is tangled up in trauma. Gosh. My favorite non-traumatic thing. I think my favorite character is like Iris and her rapport with Arco.
Yeah.
And like that their names like put together literally are a rainbow. And I don't know, just like the moment where it like mentions that specifically, like it has kind of the feeling of like someone being like so happy that they thought of that like you gotta like make sure the reader knows that happened. That's in there. It's all right, Zoraida. No, that's a good joke. I appreciate that you took the time to make sure that I got that you did that, because I am the reader who completely missed it until Rose is like, I wonder if I should tell her that her name with her brothers is a rainbow.
So
probably shouldn't tell her. It's like, yeah, Rose. Okay, we got it. I see you. That was funny. All right. What's yours?
I like the pen. At the end. I like the pen. It's a really cool pen. The story is really cool. The whole book. I was going to say descriptions again. I think I've just said descriptions of something for the last two books. I love the descriptions in this book, but I want that pen.
Some of the best descriptions are of things that are absolutely traumatic. Which is why I didn't reference them here.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
man.
My favorite description is of the throne, but yikes. Ugh.
One of my favorite descriptions is of a scene we discussed in the first half.
Yeah. Beautiful description, but not
gorgeous, but
not a good time.
No. But no,
except for the reader.
I want that pen. Read the book to find out about the pen, but I want that pen.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me in this episode and for joining us for this trilogy.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
I always freak out at this moment, even though I said the same thing so many times at so many places. You can find me on Twitter at MamaDragon20, and you can find me on TikTok and Instagram at MamaDragonS_den. It is Mama Dragon's Den. There is no apostrophe. As well as, and for both of those are my creative outlets. D&D content on TikTok. It's great. And then I am also a co-host with Nicole from this podcast for Point and Play, POINTE and Play, which is a dance and music discussion / comedy podcast, where we talk about pretty much anything related to those two topics from the lens of our own experiences, and decades worth of experience in both of those spheres. And we are also on TikTok, where we post anything related to those that we're doing. I've posted marimba warm-ups before, so come check that out. It's fun. And beyond that, I am one of the rotating guests on Crit Chat, which is a D&D DMing advice podcast. Come for the chaos. Come for the advice, stay for the chaos is probably the better way to say it.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that's where you find me. I am on Twitter pretty consistently, though, so come talk to me. Have fun.
Cool. All right. So, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you in a fortnight. All music used in this podcast was created by Nicole as Heartbeat Art Co. and is used with permission. Our transcriptionist is Heather. Follow her on Twitter at MamaDragon20. We're proud members of the Certain Point of View Network. Find all the CPOV shows at www.certainpov.com. You can contact us on Twitter at BooksThatBurn or by email at booksthatburn@yahoo.com. Please consider leaving us a tip at ko-fi.com/booksthatburn or becoming a monthly supporter on patreon.com/booksthatburn. All patrons get access to our upcoming book list, bonus content, including the second half of all interviews, and will receive a one-time shout-out. To get updates on our written reviews, recent episodes, and newly completed transcripts, subscribe to our fortnightly newsletter at buttondown.email/booksthatburn. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review wherever you're listening. This helps people to find the show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.